And welcome to the Oddity Archive, the show that isn't afraid to, or at least isn't smart enough to realize that it takes things a little far at times. So let's get down to that. So, as is unintentional tradition around here, I'm devoting the first episode of the season to my odd little tendency of trying to learn something new and or fix something up around the archive, between seasons. And so this year, I'm going to blab at great length and out of character about a couple of stabs that I took at trying to make the most out of my admittedly not always so impressive AV setup. So, with that in mind, let's start things off with a look at a downright embarrassing and possibly credibility-killing sequence of events pertaining to my Laserdisc setup. Back in March, I stopped production of Archive for a few days so I could give Archive HQ a new coat of paint, and I'm pretty sure it's the first new coat of paint that this place has ever had. But anyway, when I was moving my stuff back into this particular room, I took the first look at the back of my regular casual viewing Laserdisc player since I first bought it. And when I first got this particular unit, I was so thrilled that it has pseudo laser karaoke capability that I paid a big fat zero attention to this player's other features. And of course, since then I've acquired a proper laser karaoke unit, which is also what I use just in general when I'm transferring footage. But anyway, I somehow, in one of my all-time biggest stupid Benny Boy moments, never realized that this unit has an AC3 output for Dolby Digital sound. Now, I already owned 2 or maybe 3 Dolby Digital AC3 encoded discs, and one of those was already covered on an archive episode, and that was a test disc called Video Essentials. But, of course, I was well aware that Laserdisc players, and maybe there's an exception out there, but Laserdisc players needed a special external AC3 decoder to access the Dolby Digital track. And that's even if your regular AV receiver handles Dolby Digital. Well, of course, this didn't stop me from running a line directly from the machine to my receiver just for the hell of it. And of course, I was unable to access that audio track. And coincidentally, over the years, I've managed to accrue a couple of DTS encoded Laserdiscs. And I tried those too, again, just for the hell of it, and shock of shocks, it didn't work. But anyway, crazy person that I am, I figured, well, maybe it's time to invest in an AC3 decoder. I went snooping around the internet, largely around the Laserdisc database and some of the other AV Geek sort of forums, to see what the best AC3 boxes were. And one of the items on the list that I came up with was the LEXICON LDD1, which I believe was one of the first round of AC3 demodulators issued in 1995 when they first came out. And anyway, as you can probably tell, it was the LEXICON that I was able to get the best price on. And that was still in the neighborhood of $50 plus shipping. And I had to find a new power supply for it. And I think my grand total with all the shipping costs for all this stuff was a little shy of $100. To put this in perspective, I think I paid $10 for the Laserdisc player. But anyway, the box that this unit came in got completely decimated by UPS, and I even went as far as to post a picture of it on Facebook and Twitter at the time. But thankfully the LEXICON itself was well packaged by the seller and it arrived unharmed, and I'm really not sure what else there is to say about this thing. I found the manual online and I set the switches to the proper positions, and it worked just great right out of the box. So once I got the AC3 up and running, one of the first things I did was, just for the hell of it, was to see if I could get it to pass a DTS signal. And it didn't. And then I went a little crazy. So I wanted to see if there was any way, without modification, to cheat my Laserdisc player into passing a DTS signal. I mean, I can pass DTS through a coax audio cable, from a DVD or a Blu-ray player. This is how Ben's squirrely little brain works. Spoiler alert, I never succeeded. But anyway, what led to this was I was looking for any information I could find on whether or not you could pass DTS through this type of thing. And I found 2 bits of information. Yes, you can, period, and no, you can't, period. With no real further explanation, and especially with regards to Laserdisc. And the simple real answer is yes, you can, but only if it's a proper digital coax port, i.e. not an AC3 output. But it took me way too long to figure this out. So anyway, I just happened onto this early standalone DTS decoder, albeit once again minus the power supply. And this is a MILLENNIUM 246 or 2.4.6 DTS decoder. It dates to 1997, and the price was right. It was $20. And the idea was that since the LEXICON was already changing the signal around, maybe by this point, if I added a separate non-receiver DTS setup into the signal chain, maybe I could trick the Laserdisc player into passing the signal. Of course, this was not one of my smarter theories, and it certainly wasn't one of my prouder moments. But I did, however, successfully use this thing with a DVD player and a DTS encoded disc, and it ably latched onto the soundtrack, so the unit works just fine. But otherwise, this thing is kind of useless to me because I don't foresee ever needing a separate standalone DTS decoder for anything else. For a while, I was seriously considering upgrading the Laserdisc player that normally lives in here, the one you just saw, and upgrading it for one with both an AC3 output for Dolby Digital and preferably an optical output for DTS, because my AV receiver has optical as well. And then I just wanted better mechanics than my existing player. I mean, the one I've got is okay, but it's a pretty mediocre machine in the greater scheme of things. I mean, it's pretty noisy, and still frames aren't the greatest. They tend to be kind of jittery. And by the standards of the time for Laserdisc players, things like the signal-to-noise ratio are pretty mediocre. But anyway, I gave up on my little search because one of my demands for this would-be new player would be that it would have to fit in this home entertainment center, and I'd still have to be able to, close the doors. And it's 15 inches, let me zoom in a little, 15 inches from the rear wall to the point at which the doors close. And the best I could find for any of the models that met my needs was still going to be a little over 16 inches deep. And my CED player already sticks out the back, but there was already an existing hole in the back by design by the original manufacturer for such things. And so anyway, a couple of years ago, let me zoom in on that. A couple of years ago, I drilled/sawed a big ugly hole in the back of this thing so I could pass the cables a little more neatly out the back. Because prior to this, I used to have to run them up behind the shelf and out that existing hole in the back, and it always meant pinching the cables. So then I was kicking around the idea with this existing hole in mind of just taking out the entire rear wall of this. But the thing is, this particular room is just a dust farm. It always has been. And I didn't want the stuff that I keep in here to get even more dirty than it already does. So then I thought about expanding this hole to the size of the Laserdisc player. But the thing is, this kind of pegboard-like veneer, whatever this is kind of flimsy, and I think I'd wind up inadvertently removing the whole thing, whether I wanted to or not, which, as I said, I was trying to avoid. But anyway, as such, I have temporarily suspended my slightly deranged quest to play DTS-encoded Laserdiscs. But anyway, I do intend to revisit this at some point, but if I have to overhaul my home entertainment center setup, I'd like to do it right. And this also means like doing something about my awful stack of stereo gear and all that. And I'd like to be able to, for example, reintroduce permanently my 8-track deck into the setup, and permanently implement, say, my DBX unit into my setup. So in other words, I feel like I have things that need done a lot worse. Next to VHS, the most common media format that we look at / listen to around here would have to be LPs, records, vinyl. And I've had my turntable for just shy of a decade now. It's going to turn 10 later this year. But anyway, in that near decade, my turntable has been in, shall we say, more than regular use. But towards the end of last season, it was starting to give me some problems. Most notably, sibilance, S sounds, and it didn't matter what record I was using or where on the record I was, it was just giving me a lot of sibilance. And all around, just the sound outside of that had grown kind of harsh. And I figured, well, I've never replaced the stylus, admittedly. Maybe it's time. So I ordered a couple of those online. And then, as I mentioned in the last sequence, late last season, I, gave the place a new coat of paint. And when I was moving my stuff back into this room after I was done, real slick guy that I am, I managed to bash my turntable into a piece of furniture. And in doing that, I managed to knock the tone arm completely out of whack. So that was one more thing I was going to have to work on. And then, with that in mind, I was just thinking, well, I've never really tried to assess my setup, so this would be a good time for it. And so I went online, and I found this old audio obstacle course album that Shure put out, who also makes cartridges for turntables, and more famously, microphones. And 3 days after this showed up in the mail, just by some weird cosmic accident, I was going through a thrift store bin, and I found an older edition from the same company. And I figured I'd add that to the mix as well. So anyway, let's take a look at my attempt at fixing up and just all around tuning up and assessing the Archive's turntable. Somehow I sense I'm not going to make too many friends in the vinyl snob community for my little homebrew tune-up, but I think it makes sense for my own needs. So, first off, as I mentioned, I wound up getting another stylus, another of the stock stylus for this particular turntable, which is a Newmark TT USB. And I actually got a pair of them, and I think it was $15 on Amazon. So here's the spare, complete with the cover. But if my camera will focus, you can see the red housing in there, and then the needle is at the bottom. This is still taped in, so I don't really want to open it yet until I need it. But anyway, my first thought was actually to completely replace the cartridge, the whole cartridge, with something a little nicer. But the more I thought about it, it didn't really make much sense to invest in, say, a $100 plus cartridge for what I believe at the time was a $90 turntable. And if I'm going to make that kind of investment, I think I'd rather just go all the way and shoot for a little nicer turntable. So in the short term, I'm just sticking with the status quo. And I mean, seriously, my beaten up, badly mastered, cheap stock, record ripoff stuff is only ever gonna sound so good anyway. But anyway, I'm not going to give you a real tutorial on replacing the stylus. All you do is you unscrew back in here it's just a sleeve, and then you pop off the whole assembly here, and then you pry the old stylus off, in this case, again, the red, and you can just get in there with a screwdriver to separate it a little, and then you can just pop it right off, and you just stick the new one on there. You literally just pop it on there, and it's as simple as that. Now, if you really need the help, I'm sure there are real tutorials out there. The way I learned to set the counterweight, the tracking force on a turntable years ago, was admittedly pretty quick and dirty. So what you would do is you'd throw a record on the turntable, and the only requirement was that it wouldn't be warped. And then you would just take the counterweight here, this whole end piece, and then you just twist it around to the point where the needle and the record would be making solid, constant contact and, not bouncing around. And then you'd take the anti-skate wheel here and you'd just turn it all the way counterclockwise to maximum, and that was that. And it seemed to work pretty well, so I didn't question it. But having said that, given the way I was doing it, I never knew how much force I was using on a record. All I knew was I wasn't digging into it too much. And so I went looking around for the proper way to set things, and this is what I read the most often. So you start by setting it so that the needle would just barely hover over a record. Not touch it, but just barely hover over it. Then you'd take this ring here with the numbers on it, which you can turn around independently of the weight, and then you'd set it to 0. So 0 would be at the 12 o'clock position. And then you would add weight, so you'd have the numbers, start going up, and have more weight until the needle and the record make constant, reliable contact without, jumping along. And then you would take the anti-skate, and there's these little notches, well, not notches, but marks on it. And going from left to right, it's minimum to maximum. So I believe it's 0 to 4. But you'd set it according to the weight that you had just come up with. So in this case, I'd have it at medium, right in the center. And as I found using my audio obstacle course record, that wasn't good enough. It tracks the best with it at maximum. So after all that, I found that I've basically been doing it at least right-ish all these years. I just didn't know how much force I was using. So I would have 2 grams roughly then, and definitely 2 grams now on a force on a record, and 1.5 to 2 seems to be the norm. So yeah, I guess it was kind of nice to know that I'd kind of been doing it right. The two test records I own were ostensibly made to be tested in tandem with Shure brand cartridges, but in looking at what kind of tests were on the discs, it just didn't seem to be much of a necessity. I just thought I'd mention that. But anyway, I wasn't too happy with the tests on this older one that I had found in the thrift store. This thing's from 1973, by the way. I just felt like it wasn't putting my setup through the paces to where I could really gauge things, you know? I was a lot more impressed with the one that's on the turntable right now, which is the one I bought online, the 1982 one. And all the audio on here is at 45 RPMs, and it really puts your stuff through its paces. And it also does, in my opinion, a far better job of describing and giving examples of things that can go wrong. And it also has these handy dandy little strobes on the label. So if you have a small handheld fluorescent light, you can hold it over it, and as the record's going around, and you can see what speed and for what country and all. As it's going around, it'll look like a solid black bar if it's playing right, you know, if it's playing good and stable. And I haven't been able to test that, but if I find something where I can, I probably will. The sound's always seemed pretty stable on this machine to me, so I'm not too terribly worried about that. But anyway, the great novelty of this disc is the last track on side 2, this very intimidating looking track. And this lets you figure out the resonance of your tone arm, and or cartridge more accurately. And this allows you to somewhat hear, but more to see what your setup can handle. And I am pleased to report that the needle didn't jump once in any of the tests on either disc. I'm less pleased to report that while I've been able to more or less rein in the problems I was starting to encounter over the last few months, I'm still kind of having some of the same old, like, sibilance, more sibilance towards the end of a side, that sort of thing. But anyway, I've got 2 items that I'd like to finish up with. And the first is I've taken some video already of my cartridge taking the resonance test that I mentioned a moment ago. And I'm not featuring the audio per se, because this is one of those things that I don't think YouTube, and not to mention any direct audio feed on my part, would be able to be accurately reproduced. But yeah, you got that. And then for the second clip, I just want to give you a little appetizer for the next regular archive episode. Enjoy.
Eight hertz. 9 hertz. 10 hertz. 11 hertz.
'Come on, it's all town, it's Come on, ease on down the road.
Well, that's it for today's archive. Join us next time when I host a roundtable discussion featuring some of the world's greatest Laserdisc and vinyl snobs, in which we'll discuss the indisputable merits of a $10,000 set of speakers and cables shielded with the intestines of deceased legendary audio engineers.
This completes the test program of the Shure TTR-117 trackability test record.